Hi, today I'm going to talk about the 490 years that Daniel the prophet prophesied of. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, he talks about 490 years. Those 490 years are called the mercy period, or the mercy years, that is given to the Gentiles. The Gentiles will have a mercy period of 490 years. Now, that's 70 times 7, so with 70 weeks. We're looking at 70 times 7. Okay, so that's how Daniel chapter 9 verse 24 calculates to that. Now, in this section, there is a verse in Daniel chapter 9 verses 4, I think, where it talks about that he realized what Jeremiah was talking about. The mystery Babylon's captivity. The United States is mystery Babylon. And it'll be 70 years of captivity. Now, Babylon will control, and like they did in the past, it will happen again. It's history repeating itself, and it always seems to line up in sevens, in batches of 70s or sevens. So in this case, we have the beginning of the 70 times 7 back here at the War of Kapau. That is in 1531. Now, how do I know this? Well, I'm taking everything from a mid-term point. The mid-term point is 1776. Now, you might ask me, why would I use that date? For two reasons. First of all, I can't trust the Gregorian calendar because the Catholic Church has made a terrible mistake. There's 240 years difference between the Hebrew Jewish calendar and our current calendar. So we know from that alone that we've got a serious issue to worry about. And that happened because the Pope Gregory, when he wanted to modify the Julian calendar to create the Gregorian calendar, instead of going all the way back to Julian's period when Julius Caesar started it, which was like 45 years before Christ was born, he started from a point which was in the time of Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea, and that was Constantine, the Constantinople period. And so 330 years from the time of Christ's birth, he then calculates, taking one day off 100 years, which caused the stray of the calendar from the equinox. Instead of doing 13 days, he only did 10. So there's 240 days missing, which is like the 3 days that he should have made the 13 rather than a 10. That is one way to explain it. There are other various reasons why there is no evidence of 300 years of architecture, because every year, every 100 years, we see the change of kingdoms and architecture starts transforming as well. And there are 300 years lost. So we do know that today it's impossible that we're living in the millennium by 18 years, 2018. So the year according to the Jewish calendar is 5,779, whereas we think it's year 2018. Now, if we were to make the Jewish calendar starting from the point of Christ, then it would be the year 1779. So really, we're really only the year 1779 if we go by the Hebrew biblical calendar. Now, the Jews base their calendar on genealogies, and they have, from the Maccabees all the way through, they've continually kept a record of their genealogy. So that's how they know what the year really is. And that the year 6000 or the year 2000 for us is 240 years to come. So for a lot of people who have believed in churches that base their faith on 1844 or in 1914, like in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses, or in the case of Seventh-day Adventists, 1814, we haven't reached those dates yet. They haven't even arrived. Because if, again, as I said, if we use the Hebrew biblical calendar, we're only at the year 1779 and we're not there. So I totally am ignoring the Gregorian calendar in that point of view. not trying to count from the time of Christ to now. It's just not worth it because of the discrepancies of 240 years. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a starting point instead, which is far more accurate, and that's a prophetic starting point. And that's what Christ always says, that God shows us through signs, by observance. That's why they use the calendar of observance with 13 months, 28 days, and the moon cycle, which had perfect weeks and months, 7, 14, 21, 28, rather than 29, 30 or 31 as we have in our calendar with only 12 months. So here I'm going to explain that the point from there to there is halfway. So 490 years I went mid-term event, and the mid-term event is found in Daniel chapter 7 verse 4. That is where we see the eagle's wings separate from the lion. That is very famous. The lion represents the King of England, King George III, and the wings represents the United States, the eagle's wings. And when they were cut off, they were made to stand as a man, and a man's heart was given into it. Heart is reason. That's Thomas Paine's Age of Reason book, that everything was done by reason. The heart is deceitful above all men, and who can know it? Instead of by revelation and the Spirit of God, everything was done by the arm of flesh, by reason. So that's what happened on that date. And that was the birth of the beast that was prophesied, because the beast, it separates church from state. It no longer wants revelation as its guide, but rather reason, the big fish eating the little fish concept, manifest destiny, and then the Monroe Doctrine, transforming the whole Americas into what they call a democracy, but it's a Masonic system, some Masonic republics. I've said in various other videos that if you follow in my channel, you will see Simon Boulevard, Francisco Morazon, Sam Houston, Benito Juarez. They were all Masons, and they were all revolutionaries, just like George Washington was a Mason. So I call the US Masonic Babylon, the Mystery Babylon, the American Revolution, the mark of the beast, which started because the Masons used the 666 rule. And we'll talk about that a bit later. But Daniel chapter 7, 4. So that's the midpoint. So 490 years from that side to that side ends up to 2021. Now before the year 2021, we know that the Antichrist will rise up and deceive the world. And if it were possible, even the very elect will be deceived. And those deceptions, with the help of the false prophet, which is the Protestant Reformation, the evangelical movement that are combining with Donald Trump for this so-called bogus Israel, that not the Jews don't want it. They don't believe in Jerusalem being the capital city, because they're waiting for the King David and a throne like the throne of David, with the basic 10 commandments being the in replacement to a constitution that's full of corruption and businessmen. So
the embassy was moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I was there. It was as surreal a moment as I've ever witnessed. You made that promise. You kept that promise. What was it that just made you decide to do what no other president, even though they had promised it as well, what made you decide, I'm going to do this because I said I would?
It was a campaign promise. I thought it was very important. And you know who really likes it the most are the evangelicals. I'll tell you what, I get more calls of thank you from evangelicals, and I see it in the audiences and everything else, than I do from Jewish people. But the evangelicals appreciate more than the Jews, which is incredible.
We are handing out this new pamphlet, which is talking about the recent President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. And we say that according to Jewish religion, this is unacceptable. It's not just the question of Jerusalem, it's the question of entire Palestine. This entire occupation is unacceptable according to Judaism. And we have masses of Jewish people worldwide who totally oppose all what the state of Israel stands for.
We have the Industrial Revolution, which was the god of mammon, and mammon capitalism through Martin Luther. That's when they started flipping land, having real estate agents that took over the land that was owned by the church and state in a feudal system. And all of that changed on the 4th of August. Now that's a very important date, the 4th of August, and I'll go through a timetable of the 4th of August, how many times that has come into effect. But for now, I just want to explain that there has to be a fake Israel, false miracle that would deceive the world, and Donald Trump fulfilled that. What happened, President Truman 70 years ago, which is not just a coincidence, there's 70 years of captivity the United States has had, Jerusalem, and that's why it says in the book of Revelations in chapter 11 not to build a temple in the city of Jerusalem in the Holy Land, because it is given to the Gentiles to tread foot for 3.5 years. So Donald Trump set up the abomination of desolation, which was bringing in what they called the American Embassy, which is an abomination in the sight of God. The 4th of July, Declaration of Independence, is a Masonic human sacrifice date. Like the 3 presidents of America were all human sacrifices on the 4th of July. I kid you not. I'll go through that a bit later. But for now, 3.5 years from the year 2000 in May when he did it. So we're getting into the 490 mercy period years ending, which is the fullness of the Gentiles' cup of iniquity, full and overflowing. Now, what's going to happen at that point, at the year 2021, is the world is going to get a chance. They're going to get a chance to repent. And that chance is when the light must come first and then rejected. That will be the fullness of the Gentiles' cup of iniquity, full and overflowing. Well, that is, we can find in Romans chapter 11, 25 to 27. The mystery that the Gentiles need to know is the 144,000 is the light, the restoration of Israel. When they are gathered together, when God restores the house of Israel. And I'm not talking about this bogus Israel that Donald Trump has declared the capital city being Jerusalem, or President Truman 7 years ago establishing the state of Israel. I'm talking about the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. I'm talking about Daniel chapter 2 verses 44, I think it goes like 43 to 45, and it talks about the stone that's cut out of the mountain without hands. They will collect all the toes. The toes represent the last part of the iron and clay, which is the division between the Protestant nations and the kingdoms of the Catholic Church, the Roman Empire and the Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox, which is iron because they're a continuation of the legs. So, in this version that I'm explaining to you right now, the 70 years started in 1948. That's the Mystery Babylon captivity of USA, 70 years of captivity, by President Harry S. Truman. And that will continue until 2018, when the Antichrist has to then establish, that's Donald Trump's job, the city of Jerusalem. And so the world will marvel at this false miracle that happened in 2018. So it's the beginning of the 3.5 years that we're already in right now. Now some people are saying, well, what about the tribulation period? When does that come in? Well, some could argue that the tribulation has already started. I mean, what's going on around the world, war of violence. Others could say, no, it's going to come in at the end of the first 3.5 years, that the Antichrist has done his best to try to deceive everyone, and then he'll enforce the mark of the beast after that period of time because of the restoration of Israel. and the two witnesses that will seal up the heavens. There'll be a great drought. You know, right now we're going through hurricanes and all sorts of great weather changes with fires and everything, but it's going to increase like a baby. When a mother is giving birth to the baby and the labour is getting stronger and stronger, that will happen as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read now a history of 4th of July, September 11th, and the 4th of August. It seems like 4 is a very important number to the Masons. They seem to like that number. And but anyway, 490 years of the mercy period is just about up. The rejection of the gathering of the house of Israel from the four corners of the earth must happen. And people that will come from everywhere to gather to the great day when the great gathering of the New Jerusalem is established. This is the time of the New Jerusalem. And we're being commanded to flee Babylon. We can't stay in it. So it's vital that no one takes the mark of the beast in the United States or around the world that's fornicating with Jezebel, which is the United States Wall Street market system. Flee from her and return to the old ways, which is the ways of Adam's first commandment to multiply and replenish the earth. Agriculture, living back on farming, to turn the weapons into plowshares. No more war. So that's all going to happen through the help of the house of Israel, who will regain their right to rule the world. And the Gentiles, it says that the kings and queens shall lick the dust of their feet. That has to happen. So in the end, I clearly brought up how this system works with the prophecy. I referred to you Daniel chapter 9 verse 24, the captivity, USA, 70 years of captivity to Babylon, and the birth, which is Daniel chapter 7 verse 4, George Washington, the Masonic nation that will rise up. In my previous YouTube videos, you will see how I put in the 4 apocalyptic horsemen. The white horse represents Christopher Columbus when he discovered Panama and started building the first European colony in Panama. That was in 6th of April. It was called Bethlehem or Belém in Spanish. And then we have the city of David, which is here in Chiriquí in Panama. So that is the beginning. Then after that we have the redcoats, which is, the red horse. That's the second great conqueror. That's England. And the sun never set on the English Empire. So they tried to take over the world. But, obviously then came 1776 with the separation of the lion and the eagle. And that set up the black horse, which is the black horse cavalry. And they had the black uniform with the yellow scarf with the crossbones look. From then on they had the star, the Masonic star that the sheriff uses, like Texas uses their star. It's all Masonic and it comes with the pentagram and so forth. And then we get up to the 1948. There are other things that occurred, but obviously for just today I wanted to just explain that. But then we see after the black horse, we see the pale horse, which like Donald Trump, but it's obviously a G.I. Joe green machine. That's the US military. They're all dressed in green. And when they went to Iraq and the Gulf, they dress in a sandy colour, more pale type of colour, the camouflage. And so what you're seeing is the apocalyptic horsemen parallel lining up with the prophecy of 490 years, or the 70 times 7. And on top of that, we have the beasts that Daniel chapter 7 verse 4 talks about, and it goes down. he talks about the bear. The bear represents California, the Bear Republic. The three ribs represent England. They first conquered, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Then Thomas Jefferson was able to buy the Louisiana Purchase, which was the New France. That was the centre. A rib represents church and state. The woman represents church. So the kingdom or monarchy. So the Republicans came all the way to the Republic, the Bear Republic, which was California, not the Banana Republic in Panama, but the Bear Republic. And with the Bear Republic, with the three ribs, there was a conqueror of the three kingdoms: Spain, New Spain, and New France, and New England. So you had the three ribs in the mouth of the bear. And then after that, we saw the four it looked like a leopard. It looked like a leopard, but it wasn't a leopard. It was a jaguar. And through Latin America, they wear a jaguar. They wear the skin of the jaguar with the jaguar's head on them as their crown to represent the royalty of the Aztecs and the Mayas and all the way to the Incas. All of them used that thing, and the France had conquered parts like in Colombia and other parts. So the four notable ones with the feathers of the rooster, the chicken represents France, and the four notable ones is Francisco Morazan, Benito Juarez, Simon Bolivar, and Sam Houston. They were the four great revolutionaries that transformed the whole Manifest Destiny plus Monroe Doctrine, spreading the beast, the Masonic order, down South America and all the way to North America, getting rid of all the European strongholds and replacing them with the United States Monroe Doctrine military. Well, the US has been invading the Americas for last century at least. So in the end, I connect the dots of the prophecies of the apocalyptic horsemen, the conquerors who have conquered in this 490-year period. I've connected the dots of the four beasts that will rise. Now the last beast is it's a horrible beast. He has teeth, iron teeth, and he's grinding. Well, that's the Industrial Revolution, the industrial military complex. You ever have a look at the tanks? They don't have wheels, they have teeth. And they use those treads, metal treads, and they crush everyone. The heads of the poor, they grind their faces to the ground. And that was promised, prophesied to happen, that the Antichrist would reign with the fourth kingdom. And that was such a distressing time because Daniel saw all these kingdoms rise to power and how terrible the atrocities they would do to the house of Israel. Now the house of Israel, a lot of people don't know this, but if you go to Apocrypha, there is a part in there in Esdras, which Christopher Columbus had discovered that the book had spoken about the lost tribes of Israel being sent to a land that nobody had known about before, a land that's never been seen or heard. So he believed that he was going to be sent by the Holy Ghost to find this so-called promised land where the house of Israel were actually sent. And when he came to Panama, he believed he discovered the New Jerusalem. He said this is a new heaven and a new earth, and he just called it Bethlehem. And he called it that because he believed that the indigenous people were actually of the lost tribes of Israel. And he thought that they could unite with him and they could go and try to recover Israel and Jerusalem from the Muslims who had taken over. It's part of the Christian Crusades. So anyway, there's a little history for you to understand that the house of Israel is not really lost to the elite who know. They have not bowed down to Baal, as it says in Romans chapter 11. In Romans 1 to about 5, it talks about that there is an elect that have not bowed down to Baal. The Gentiles have all bowed down to Baal. That's what we see in the dollar. We see in the dollar where it talks about the date of the New World Order. It actually is May, not the 4th of July, because that was the beginning of the Illuminati, the launching of Adam Weishaupt. So what we're seeing is the creation of the beast, or the birth of the beast. And so we're just missing now, who is the false prophet? Is he Billy Graham, a continuation of the false prophet Martin Luther? Or is he somebody else? We will find out in the next video I do, where I reveal who the false prophet is. And believe me, you're going to be shocked that it wasn't who you might have presumed. A lot of people think it's the Pope. But the Pope hasn't been able to do what this false prophet is doing. And I will expose it once and for all, because it's for you to know now who the false prophet is and what his role is in this whole deception of this new world order, globalization. Okay? I think I've covered everything in this video. Thank you. And please look towards the next video after this that will be specifically talking about the false prophet and the beast and how they combine together and what their roles are. Also, just on a very important note, talking about being caught up, which a lot of Christians are believing the pre-tribulation rapture, nothing's going to happen until all those people from all the different countries come to where the 144,000, the lost tribes of Israel, come together and receive the seal of God on their heads. And then there'll be people from all the nations of the earth coming to uniting with them. Now, they're going to be protected like it was in the days of Noah. God says, flee Babylon, get out of her, don't stay there. And that's the very important key here, is where the eagle, where the carcass is, so shall the eagles be gathered. Well, the carcass represents Adam, because he was the man that first died and buried outside of the Garden of Eden. So God promised that he would restore the covenant of the Garden of Eden in the millennium. So the gathering has to be returning to the Garden of Eden. Now, people might say that they found Noah's Ark way over in Mount Ararat. But here's the thing, that doesn't mean that's where it all started. You see, somewhere the Garden of Eden must have been a different location. And people have guessed, well, maybe it was in Ethiopia, the river Euphrates and so forth. But when Christopher Columbus came towards Venezuela on his third voyage, he realized that he discovered in the Americas, which he didn't call the Americas obviously, but the strange land that he called, he said he discovered the Garden of Eden. So that's why he called Panama, Berlin, he called it the celestial land, he says, which was a place of paradise. He called it after the Garden of Eden. So the biggest eagle, the greatest looking eagle you'll ever see, is not in the United States, but right here in Panama. The claws are so big, they're as big as a bear, and they can grab a sloth by his head and crush his skull and fly off with the weight of that. The wingspan is like, I think 2 meters or something crazy. So where the carcass is, so shall the eagles be gathered. And those eagles have a beautiful, what they call corona. They look like a lion. When you look at them, they have the feathers around their heads, not like the bald eagle in the United States. These ones have amazing feathers. So my point is that God has a purpose for the center of the Americas, the bridge of the Americas in Panama. This is the promised land. And this is a place of the gathering for the last days. And you'll find that the lost tribes of Israel will come here. While all hell breaks loose in the United States with economic crisis and all the rest of it, and people lining up for a piece of bread like in the days of Nazi Germany, taking the mark of the beast, because they'll be so disappointed that they weren't raptured and they couldn't see a rapture. So the next step, or the next level, is to live in denial and just believe to take the mark as a peace. There'll be those that will probably commit suicide as well, because it'll be just all too much for them. But my point is, it's better to be where God wants the wise virgin to go with his lamp full of oil than to be in somewhere else where, you know, there's going to be disaster everywhere. Okay, so anyway, this is my explanation today, and hopefully it sheds some light and open your eyes to another concept. Why do I say Panama is the Garden of Eden, and why the point here is because of various reasons, and it's a neutral ground between the north and the south. There is no standing army here, so the people are at peace. Not like in the United States and Australia and Canada, who have armies that are out fighting. We have to come in peace and love and live in harmony with Heavenly Father in an agricultural system, and not with the mark of the beast or the monetary system. We have to learn to live off the land, just like Adam and Eve were commanded